Some people can picture an entire epic battle in their heads, like their own personal fantasy movie. Meanwhile, I can't even remember why I just opened the fridge. Was I thirsty? Was I feeding a cat? Whatever, I'll remember in 20 minutes. When your D&D party rolls initiative, does that scene play out with tokens on a battle map, or does it play out only in the words of the Dungeon Master and the imaginations of the group? And more importantly, is that playstyle working for you as well as you think it is? The debate between maps and minis and theater of the mind for combat in D&D has been raging for years, and there is no objectively correct answer. But that doesn't stop us from arguing about it, of course. This is the internet.
There's nothing that whisks me away more to lands of myth and legend than a 30-minute conversation about where exactly these 5 guards are. That does it for me.
Oh yes, of course. And I too am immersed in a realm of fantasy, majesty, and wonder when my dungeon master unrolls a piece of dry erase plastic. God damn!
Brennan Lee Mulligan and Ross Bryant are playing a part here. They openly admit that they're exaggerating and that both styles are valid. But I do think that this caricature does a pretty good job representing each argument. That is, if the people arguing had recently eaten a full set of SAT vocab flashcards.
Your materialistic, cynical, realpolitik Dungeons and Dragons.
People who prefer maps and minis like the efficiency of everyone in the party having an easy, immediate understanding of the scene. When you need to take your movement or see who's caught in an area of effect, there's no guesswork. Meanwhile, those who prefer theater of the mind enjoy the drama and the romance of imagining something far more immersive and detailed than a battle map could ever capture. I have chosen my side, of course, but I'm not playing at your table, so my preferences shouldn't concern you. What should concern you is this. I spent a long time tolerating a style of play that really wasn't working for me because I didn't want to rock the boat. If any of your players are like me, then it might be worth asking, is the playstyle you're using actually right for your table, or is it just the norm and nobody wants to challenge it? Today, we're going to talk pros, cons, and compromises. Grab your top hat and tails because we're starting off with a trip to the theater. Oh, how embarrassing. I forgot my top hat and tails. Whew, crisis averted. Anyway, the first big win for Theater of the Mind, it's completely free. You don't need a dry erase grid, 3D printed miniatures, or thousands of dollars worth of Dwarven Forged terrain. All you need is your imagination and an arsenal of dramatic phrases like toothy maw and oozing black ichor. And no, you can't use that as a band name, I'm using that as a band name. Dungeon Masters don't have to spend hours drawing trees or combing through hundreds of digital maps to find the one that perfectly aligns with your vision. You just describe the scene, lean back, and let the players figure out how to ruin your perfectly planned ambush. It's budget friendly, no prep, and probably a huge relief if you're tired of hauling a suitcase of terrain and minis to every game night. The suitcase should be reserved for dice, obviously. Plus, without a physical map to hem them in, players are free to imagine the scene with way more detail and drama than a battle map or terrain could realistically capture. Crumbling ruins overgrown with creeping vines, flickering torchlight reflecting off of walls carved by ancient magic. When players are conjuring up the scene in their own imaginations, they might even come up with things that feel right for the space, but that you didn't explicitly describe, like a chandelier to swing from or a fallen statue to hide behind. Theater of the Mind also allows for more flexibility. Without grids or minis, you can hand-wave little details like exact distances or positions to make combat flow faster. You don't have to worry about the disappointment of wasting an entire turn when you're just 5 feet shy of getting into range. And you don't need to spend 10 precious minutes calculating exactly where to center your fireball in order to hit the maximum number of goblins. Your DM can just say, it hits 6 of them, roll damage, instead of dropping everything for a thrilling minigame of math and measurements. It also makes it easy to improvise when your party inevitably goes off the rails. If they pick a fight in a location that you didn't expect, there's no scrambling for a last-minute map or railroading them out of combat. You can just say, okay, roll initiative, and let chaos ensue as God intended. How was that? Did it sound like I love Theater of the Mind? Great, I'll accept my Oscar for Best Actress now because I actually can't stand Theater of the Mind, to the point where I won't play long-term anymore at tables that rely on it. After the break, I'll explain why, but first, today's sponsor. Look at you, so focused! What are you working on? Another one of those kinky videos about your little dungeon? Edith, I told you it's not like that, it's a game. Well, I hope you're winning. I'm just fixing up my NPC pages on World Anvil, the world building platform. They're this week's sponsor. They just upgraded their article editor, so it's easier than ever to format your articles. Set a picture of Augury. You didn't have one where she's smiling? She looks so much prettier when she smiles. I'm not really focused on how she looks. These pages are meant to keep track of all the important information about my NPCs. Not just her backstory and personality, but her magic items, her stat block, even a map of her estate where the Thieves Guild Hall is. Where's the location pin? How is anyone gonna know if this eligible single tiefling is in their area? Edith, World Anvil is a toolkit for world builders. It's supposed to help me organize and document everything for my tabletop game, like characters, locations, factions, maps, and timelines. It's not a dating site. Well, not with that attitude. It's free to create an account, right? Yeah, and if you want to unlock all the features, you can take 51% off an annual membership with the code Ginny. Why? Move over. I'm gonna show you how it's done. What's Augury's star sign? Oh, who am I kidding? I know it's Capricorn. If your flag is firmly planted in Camp Theater of the Mind, just give me a few minutes to lay out my case for maps and minis. We'll start with the biggest win. They make it easy for everyone to be on the same page. No more stopping the game every 5 minutes to ask, wait, how far am I from the troll again? Or wait, how far are the trolls from each other? Or wait, why are there so many trolls? A map gives you a clear, shared visual of the battlefield, which means less time spent clarifying and more time spent stabbing. It also puts the players and the DM on even footing, so the game master isn't just making arbitrary calls about the layout. The fact is that Theater of the Mind requires placing a lot of trust in your DM. I'm not saying they're lying to you, but I've definitely been in games where if the DM wanted me to be in range, I magically was. And if they didn't, well, I might as well have been trying to land a spell from the moon. Sometimes it didn't feel like they were relaying information about the battlefield. It felt like they were just making it up as they went along, based on what was convenient for them. And here's the thing, I don't think this kind of dishonest gameplay is always intentional. Most DMs aren't out here cackling behind their screens, plotting ways to rob you of your big thunderwave moment. But without a visual aid, it's way too easy for their decisions about distances and positioning to be influenced by how they want the encounter to go. If Cone of Cold would wrap things up too quickly, suddenly only half the enemies are in range. And if the villain needs just one more turn to monologue, your movement speed is miraculously 5 feet short, no matter how much cardio you've been pretending your character does. That lack of clarity can undercut the tactical element of D&D, which, to be honest, is half the fun for a lot of players. Using a map creates enough structure to keep decisions grounded in reality. Or at least grounded in a world where trolls don't mysteriously multiply every time you look away. There are also a lot of people who either struggle to picture the space in our heads or struggle to retain that information over the course of a long combat. I have ADHD, so I'm not just forgetful, it's not for lack of trying, it's literally a neurological problem with my working memory. My Dungeon Master could have the most beautiful descriptions of the space. They could be Tolkien incarnate, and I would still have forgotten most of it by the time it gets to my turn. For people like me, maps are a lifeline. I don't have to hold all that information in my head where it'll inevitably leak out of my ears to make room for all the lyrics to Alice's Restaurant. Sorry, it's Thanksgiving week, it's out of my hands. And listen, maybe your mind is so sharp you don't even have to carry a sword. Personally, can't relate. But when you find yourself in a fight with a dozen goblins, 3 direwolves, a caster throwing grease, and a cleric's spirit guardian swirling around, anyone is gonna struggle to keep track. Maps also make it possible to fully use certain tactical features that are baked into the game. Attacks of opportunity, optional flanking rules, and tons of specific character abilities rely on understanding exactly where everyone is on the battlefield. It sucks to be determining whether or not you get sneak attack by way of Marco Polo. If you don't know how close your rogue is to an ally or who's in range of the paladin's aura, those features either get ignored or turned into guesswork. And let's face it, guesswork just isn't satisfying when your character is built around abilities that call for precision. Now, whenever this conversation comes up, there will be longtime D&D players claiming that back in their day, they didn't use these newfangled miniature figurines, just the power of imagination. And they had to hike to game night through 3 feet of snow uphill both ways. And sure, there have always been groups that play with nothing but paper and dice, but that certainly doesn't mean that minis are a modern invention. This is a 1979 printing of the Dungeon Master's Guide. I got it on eBay, it smells like somebody's basement. There is a whole section in here about using miniature figures. It says they add color to play and make refereeing far easier, and also that players are more readily able to visualize their array and plan actions. After all, D&D grew out of miniature war games, so grids and figures have always been part of its DNA. In AD&D, movement was provided in inches, not feet, specifically for tabletop play. And as the game evolved, the introduction of mechanics like attacks of opportunity, flanking, and feats like cleave made precise positioning even more important. So while your group might not have used miniatures, they've always been a part of the hobby. I'll bet you thought I was too young to know how you guys played back then, huh? Please. I know all about how you carved your dice out of mammoth tusks and etched your character sheets into stone tablets. I do my research. At the end of the day, there is no one-size-fits-all answer to the maps versus theater of the mind debate. That's why we're still arguing about it. But that doesn't mean that you can't communicate and compromise to make sure you're using a combat style that works for your specific table. Step 1 is figuring out your player's needs. Are there people like me whose ability to picture combat in their head ranks somewhere between goldfish memory and eternal loading screen, or players whose character builds rely on positioning, like rogues or monks? Sometimes not everyone will agree. If you've got one player advocating for loose, cinematic fights and another who gave up an ability score increase for a feat that only functions with a gridded map, the only real solution is compromise. Maybe you mix styles, theater of the mind for quick, simple skirmishes, and maps for big, chaotic melees. Or maybe the DM agrees to provide a quick 30-second pencil sketch of the environment, so there's at least something to go on. That said, some disagreements might be beyond compromise. I get that some DMs are just more comfortable with theater of the mind, but for me, my dislike of it isn't just a preference, it's an accommodation. Maps and minis are necessary for me to fully participate in the game. So if a DM says, sorry, this is a theater of the mind table, I respect their decision, but I'll be respecting it from a different game table. This is why it's crucial to address this stuff in session 0. Will combat be loosey-goosey? Will distances be hand-waved? Or will we be busting out rulers and measuring the exact blast radius of a fireball like it's the world's deadliest geometry class? For some players, the answer to that question will be a deal breaker. And if maps and minis sound like an overwhelming time sink or a financial black hole, don't panic. I promise you don't need to go out and buy a 3D printer to make this work. Unless you're looking for an excuse to buy a 3D printer, in which case, yeah, you totally need one. For in-person games, you can get a dry erase grid for 20 bucks. If you want to spice it up, you can download 2D modular terrain packs for just a few dollars online, so you can print your own trees or buildings and scatter them around a hand-drawn map. For digital games, you can use free map-making software like Dungeon Scrawl, or just grab one of the thousands of free battle maps that people have shared online. Or if you're willing to make a small investment, you can unlock paid software or map packs from creators on Patreon. Minis don't need to break the bank either. For years, I used flatback rhinestones from the craft store, but people also use Lego minifigs, coins, buttons. Literally anything smaller than an inch square can serve as a mini, so feel free to get creative. And let me be clear, your map does not need to be an exact replica of the environment. It's a reference, not a real estate listing. You can and should still provide immersive descriptions of the space, even when using maps or terrain. No matter what you choose, the most important thing is to make sure your players feel like they have what they need to participate in combat and use their character's abilities effectively. Before you click away, one quick announcement. I'm running a Black Friday weekend sale in my shop starting Friday and going through Monday. Everything is going to be 20% off, so if you haven't picked up a calendar or my new adventure book or the deck of boons and banes, this will be a great time to do that. Oh, I remember, I was gonna defrost chicken for dinner.